this is a soil blocker, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, and it creates little blocks of soil that you can then seed into, and you grow your plant in it, and then you're going to take that plant and transplant it out into your garden. There are some benefits to using a soil blocker versus plug trays. Now, plug trays are kind of the standard, I would say. Like most farmers, even gardeners, if you go buy starts at a little garden center, oftentimes they come in a little pack of a plug tray, basically. What happens with plug trays is that your seed starts growing, and let me ask you, what happens when the roots reach the edge of the tray?
All over.
Yeah, they go down in, they just try and go everywhere, right? What ends up happening is if they stay in there long enough, they start circling. It's called root circling, and they just kind of circle around, and it actually kind of root bounds your start. So some of you may have, oftentimes when I transplant something from the plug tray, I'll actually try and break up the roots just a little bit, just kind of let them break apart so that they're ready to go into the ground a little bit more. One benefit, there's actually many benefits to using a soil blocker, but one of the benefits to a soil blocker is there is no container. I mean, this is the container that you make the blocks with, but once the block is made, there's no container it's going to get root bound in. So what happens is you have these little blocks, and actually initially your plant starts growing out in the block, and the roots come to the edge of the block and they meet air. There's actually just a little bit of space between the blocks. Now, if your blocks are right up next to each other, that's not a problem too. The root will just start kind of growing over into the next block, and that's okay, because in fact, if they meet air, they do what's called air pruning. The root just kind of stops right there. If they meet another block, it might start growing into the other block a little bit, and it really isn't an issue, because later you'll come and you'll pull the blocks apart, and you might see a few root strands when you pull them apart. But when you plant those blocks into the ground, those roots are all at a ready stage to just continue growing, and it's going to make it a lot easier, nicer. In fact, if you transplant them at the right time, you basically almost see no transplant shock. There's different ways that you can mitigate transplant shock, but one of them is transplanting them at the right time from a soil block, and they just start with their roots growing out into the ground, and it's great. Absolutely fantastic. Another benefit of these is oftentimes with plug trays, people will just toss the plug tray afterwards because they're easily breakable and they crack and stuff like that. With these, you can get reusable trays. Now, these are very small ones. On a farm scale, we use like the 10 by 20. They're a little bigger, a little sturdier, but I got these just for you guys to start out with here. And you can reuse this tray over and over and over again, right? Because you can just make your blocks, transplant them, you got the tray, you can make a new set of blocks in it, right? So that is another benefit of using soil blocks. Let's see, another benefit of soil blocks is, how many of you have heard of potting on? Okay, just 2, 3. Okay, so what it is oftentimes, let's say you're wanting to grow tomatoes, and maybe you're not in California, it's a decently mild climate here, but even here, let's say you're going to like Southern California, you might not do this as much, but where we are in Tennessee, if we want an early crop of tomatoes, what we'll do is we'll start tomatoes inside, right? And oftentimes that's what we do anyways, but sometimes we start them inside so early that they outgrow their little block. And you can get a bigger block that has an indentation made in it that's the exact size of the smaller block. So as soon as your tomato has filled up this block, you can make a bigger block, and you just slip this block right down into it, and it just keeps on growing. So that's called potting on, and that's another benefit. Now, we don't have the larger soil blocks here, but this one is one of the sizes that goes in the run-up for potting on, I believe. All right. any other benefits to soil blocking? All right, if I think of it, I will tell you another one. But those are the ones that I have off the top of my head. Something that will mix up our mix in, and then we'll block from there. I just got these because they're very small and easy for this demonstration, right? So I'm going to put these down here, and 7 of you can come up and grab a little tray. This is what we will block in.
No, pero eso te lo di a ti. Hermana, ¿cómo me voy a llevar esto?
So, quick little, what I do when I go to a garden center and I'm looking for a potting mix, like if I'm going to buy a potting mix, is I'll actually like poke a little hole in the corner to kind of feel what it's like inside. I don't know if that's a good thing to do or not, but so that's what I did when I went to Home Depot. And this one has a few little bark chips and stuff, but it's mostly, you can see it's mostly like a peat moss. You can see the little white specks, that's the perlite. It's got peat moss, and I believe it has compost in it as well. So this would be fairly close to the consistency of what we would use as well. So I wanted to give you something that I hope, I poked my hand in some of them, and like I said, they had more of like just rough bark chip material. So what we're going to do is, those of you that have your trays, come on up here and we will put some mix in your trays. Yeah, I wouldn't use this as a real example, but
Make your soil first. Okay, so that's enough for 2 people. We're sharing.
oh, okay. Yeah, that's enough. Okay. Right, yeah, the fertilizer, this is pretty dry. So you can't just make a soil block directly out of this. The really cool thing about peat moss is it keeps your blocks, you're compressing these blocks in this to make them with this blocker, right? The nice thing about peat moss is it really keeps the block loose, because even though, and if you feel the potting mix, like you can squish it and it has like some sponge to it, right? So that helps keep it loose. But we want to wet this down before we actually make our soil blocks, and you want it to be about the consistency of a wrung out sponge. Okay, so moist, but not like if you squeeze it, maybe a few drops of water come out, but it's not just like wringing water, right? It's very easy to overwater your mix. It's not the end of the world. You can just throw in some more mix or some more peat moss or whatever you have around. So what we're going to do, and there's one more bucket of water over here, so you all are welcome to grab that bucket of water and follow along. I am going to just pour a little bit of water in here. And this is where you either have a tool or you get your hands dirty. I'm going to go ahead and get my hands dirty.
You want me to do that for you?
You can do it if you want. Yep. So, let's rinse my hand out here. So we're going to, and I think that's actually pretty close to our right consistency. So maybe here. So if you guys want to come and feel what the consistency looks like, so you notice that when I squeeze, there is little drips of water that come out. This might be a little bit on the wet side, but it's really not too bad. It's going to, this will work. You can see a little drips coming out, but it has a good moisture. If you guys want to feel it, you can feel what that feels like. And you can use these buckets to rinse off your hands if you want to as well. so you want down into your mix, okay? And we actually will kind of squish it around. You're just really packing that potting mix into your block. And this potting mix actually has a little bit too much of the bark chips in it even still. I would want it a little bit softer and looser than this. So this won't be as ideal as
Because it falls apart easier. Is that the idea?
well, it doesn't pack into the block as easy. All of those bark chips just kind of get in the way, etc. So you're going to pack it in like that, and then we just scrape off the bottom on the edge of this tray, and we'll see how this comes out. This will be the first try here. So then you're going to lay it down in your tray, and you actually push down on the handle because you want to leave those blocks in there. Grab the blocker and lift it up with your fingers. So you're putting a decent amount of pressure down and just lifting it up with your fingers. And it's going to come off. It does turned out pretty good actually. So this is what a little block looks like. You'll notice that the blocker has a little dibble inside it, so it leaves a little indent, and it's perfect for just dropping your seed right in there.
They sell this tray at Home Depot.
These I bought online from True Leaf Market. They're a pretty chintzy little tray. You can get more sturdy ones. In the summer, we might even water them in the morning and in the evening. But usually, you can get by with just giving them a one-time watering in the day.
What's your watering system?
We use a hose with a wand that disperses the water gently.
Like hit or miss. My problem is that sometimes you break up with it. If the water is a lot out of control,
Yes, yeah. Especially when you're first starting them, you can, if you get like a nozzle, when they're first starting, you might want more of a mist nozzle. When they are grown a little bit more, the roots of the plant actually kind of hold them together, and so they can handle a little bit harder. And we have like a shower wand that gives a soft shower of water, so it's not a mist because to try and keep them watered with a mist would just take a long time, especially if the mist is real fine. Yeah.
Do you ever water from the left?